Hi there, welcome back. Well, it took forced quarantine to actually get me to take this radio out of the storage. The reason is I've done one that was, I believed, pretty similar to this one before. This is a Grundig 3160 tube radio. I've done a 3060? And there's a series on that some time back. And I usually like doing something different. And when I got this one, I got it almost as an afterthought. And I figured, well, yeah, too similar to the other one. Let me put it aside for now. Well, when you're sitting at home with nothing to do, and if you've got nothing to do, your wife gets you to do all sorts of chores, I guess the best thing to do is get something out of the storage. And what I found is that this one is actually quite different to the 3060 that I did. And the reason has got to do with the output stage. This is a push-pull output stage using one valve. We'll get to that in a minute. So this might be a long series or a short series, I don't know. I sort of figure out as I go along. But if you enjoy this sort of thing, stick around and we'll get through this together. The condition of this radio isn't the best. It's been through pretty rough life, but everything is in place. Everything is there. All the knobs are there. All the push button, the piano keys are there. And it's got a heck of a lot of grime on it, as you can probably tell. So this is going to take some cleaning. But like all Grundigs, or like most of the Grundigs of this era, this thing should produce some pretty good sound. It's got the usual piano keys for all the options. And besides the usual, there are a few, or a couple, that actually have to do with tone shaping. Now, we have the ALS TA, which is pickup input, long wave, medium wave, short wave, and UKW, which is FM. And then there's two of them here called Klang, which is, I believe, sound. And those two, when you push them in, they bring in this little window here, which I'm not sure we can see. So when I push Klang, this thing changes between two settings, and I'm not sure what they are because I can't read it. And the other side is the same, but it's not working. There's a little window here, and there's two presets, and that's what you change. And then here we've got the treble. You can sort of see that window going up there. Over here we've got the bass, and you can also see the little window closing and opening, depending on how much bass you've got. So they've got a couple of settings that have to do with toning or shaping the sound that you get from this thing. And that's important because this thing's got two tweeters on the sides as well as the main speaker. But we'll get to that when we open up the back. The knobs are pretty simple. The only thing I don't understand is this seems to be one knob. In other words, the back one's stuck to the front one, and I would think it's just the volume. But it also says something about ferrite antenna, aus, and on. So I'm not sure what that means. I don't know where the switching is for this thing, unless it's a pull-out. We'll figure it out. So, volume control. The dial is in perfect condition except very, very, very dirty. And then here we've got the tuning. Now the tuning is not showing anything on there. And I figure this is the usual Grundig system where when you push UKW, it brings in one part of a gear which moves the FM tuning capacitor. And when you do any of the medium wave ones, of the AM ones, it connects the tuning to the AM capacitor. Now, these things aren't catching. They're not holding. So we'll have to see what's wrong with that. But as you can see, it's pretty grubby. There's a lot of grime on this thing. The woodwork in here doesn't look too bad, but when you get to the sides, you'll see what I mean. There is a tuning eye down at the bottom, which I forgot to mention. But if we look at the grill cloth, it's not bad. A couple of stains, nothing major. And we've got the tuning eye down there. So let me turn this around and show you what we've got inside. And here we are. Lots more grime. I keep saying that. There's a bit of rust visible down at the bottom here. There's not much rust elsewhere that I can see. A lot of the screws on the side there are all rusted, but we'll get to that. That's not a problem. I've actually removed a few of the valves that, or the tubes that I needed in other projects. As I said, this thing was almost a part set, unfortunately. So it's got to thank coronavirus for being brought back to life, or at least me attempting to. But everything looks pretty normal. We've got our power transformer there. The selection of the voltages is done by whichever fuse you use. So you've got to be very careful with that. You don't just take it out and put it in. Depending on which fuse you connect or where you connect your fuse, you are selecting your mains voltage that you're using. And the one we want here is 240, and I think they've only got 220. That shouldn't be a problem. That's quite usual. It's got a pretty usual Grundig power transformer over there. That valve at the back there, I believe, is the phase inverter. This thing is push-pull, and it should have a valve here, and it should be, or it is, an ELL80, which is an interesting tube, which we'll discuss in more detail later. But basically, it's a dual pentode, which drives the output transformer in push-pull, and that allows you to have a smaller output transformer. Because if it was Class A, they're usually bigger for the same amount of power. You've got a pretty hefty speaker, but these are connected with some inductors, with some chokes. Everything else here, well, the usual paper caps that need to be taken out. That will be the IF preamp, IF amplifier tube. If we go along here, we've got the other IF transformer. We've got the tuning capacitor at the back here, the AM tuning capacitor, which I notice has got no strings attached. So that's why there's nothing turning at the front. I don't know how if the clutch system is working at all, because the switches at the bottom aren't catching. The ferrite antenna and the FM tube, the ECC85, is here. That's also been cannibalized for another project at one point. So I've got a few of those lying around. Shouldn't be a problem. There's an ECH81 that goes in there as well, which I've also got a few of. So this thing looks okay. It doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look complex. It's the usual thing. I say the usual, but I usually find something different to make it more interesting for myself. The speaker's quite hefty there. And as I said, there is a high voltage tweeter over there, and there's one on the other side. Those things usually have a problem. They usually dry out. There's a foam that separates the two elements inside with a high voltage across it. They sometimes dry out and they can actually short, but we can repair that if necessary. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take it out of the cabinet, put it on the brackets so that I can flip it around as much as we'd like, and get cracking. See what's awaiting us on the inside. And just before I put this away for a while, the cabinet, you can see the veneer here is peeled off and broken. The side panel's okay. The rest of the veneer has got a few cracks, but nothing too serious. I think I can repair it. But there's quite a bit of work to do here. But that'll be left for last. So this is going to disappear for a while, fortunately. Bloody hell, look at that. This thing has had some wildlife in here. Whoa. This wasn't in an attic, it was in a barn. What I did find is that the rust that we saw on this end actually goes on underneath. And the one screw from the bottom actually had to be cut because it was completely rusted over. So there'll be some problem underneath there. I hope it's just on the edges, that it hasn't actually crept up into the transformer base. Well, we'll just have to see when we take it all out. Well, nothing too unexpected. It's lots of dirt, a bit of rust, especially on things like that bracket over there. But not too much really on the chassis, nothing on the components, which is a good thing. Everything looks pretty much in place. The chassis itself seems to be okay, except for that corner at the bottom there. It's a big mess of cables or cord, dial cord all over the place over here where it's come out. Some of it is still in place. We'll just have to see what we find when we actually try and follow them. Let me show you that gearing. That there is a typical clutch mechanism to bring in either the AM condenser or the FM condenser into operation when you turn the tuning. Now it's not working because the strings are all broken, or it seems to be. It seems that all the strings are broken. Maybe the FM isn't, but it's not catching. This either dries up or slips, so we'll have to see what we can do about that. It's usually repairable. Anything else? Well, some loose strings over here. The other thing is the switches aren't working because they should. Actually, you can see that. It does bring it back. Takes it back on AM and pushes it that way on FM. Now, that should activate the FM condenser, which is it's not, but we'll worry about that when we get to it. But it's all there. It's not broken. Sometimes they break and it can be a real bummer to fix. So that's okay. Now let's look on the underside. Let's see what we have here. We've got, unusually, the filter capacitor on the underside. It's a double cap. I haven't looked at the schematic, but I think it's 2x50. That there is the volume control. There's a switch here which is activated by the on-off. It flicks the toggle up and down, and fortunately this one's actually accessible. Sometimes they're not. This is it looks very easy to work with, and in fact I've worked on one which is very similar to this one, but it was only an AM set, which I actually rebuilt. I took everything out and rebuilt it, and I use it it's sitting here in my office, just as a bit of a gimmick. You switch it on without any protection on. It's not exactly a wise thing to do, but it looked very similar to this. Obviously this one's got the FM can over here, the other one didn't. So that's the FM front end. All the switching, as you can see, this is all completely rusted, and that's probably why the switches weren't grabbing. What else can we see? Well, there are paper caps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, not that many. Those all have to go. This guy here, these Wimmer caps, are completely useless, which is strange because Wimmer is a very good brand now. But these have all got to go. There's only one that I can see, but there's usually a couple more hiding around. They're sort of an attempt at film caps, I think, but there's a name for them. They look like toffees, but I can't remember what it's called. But the one thing that concerns me most here is actually the switching, because the switching has to work. If it doesn't catch, Jesus, crap falling out of everywhere. Bloody hell, if I don't die of coronavirus, I'm going to die of some other infection here. Well, in for a penny. Let me show you the switching close up. Well, that doesn't look good at all, does it? Now, my thought is that perhaps it's not as bad as it looks, because the rust is only on the bottom of the bracket. As you can see here, it hasn't actually crept up into the switching itself. So something is stopping it from latching. This should latch. There's a little bracket inside here that, as you let it go, it clips, and it's not clipping, and usually, not the first time this has happened. Watch. FM, when you push one of the others, FM doesn't jump back enough. Now that it has jumped back, the others are all fine. If If I do that, it doesn't clip. So FM isn't jumping back enough, and usually we follow the FM. It has this bracket over here, and it actually operates. This thing here is what operates the clutch on the tuner. So this actually carries quite a bit of force. When we do that, it rotates here. See, this should rotate. And if it doesn't rotate enough, it doesn't let that latching happen. So this thing is a bit stuck over here. So if we give it some lubrication, I think we can solve the problem. There's a spring which should push this thing back completely to there. When the FM is released, it actually works on releasing the FM. The FM is the only one that affects that. It changes from the default position, which is AM tuning, so the clutch is pushing onto the AM side to turn the AM condenser. And when you push FM, it takes it out of that default state. And what it's not doing is it's not allowing it to come back. I've had that before, which isn't usually a problem. This is all rusted up, so we lubricate that, we should get the thing sorted. Oh, that's brilliant, because these things are a real bummer. If they don't work, they can really mess you up, and you can't really fix them, and you certainly can't get new ones. But while we're here, let's have a closer look at the insides now. Those resistors usually hold out quite well. I'm hoping they do. This whole section here is the oscillator and front end. And if you can avoid messing around too much in here, you should. Because you've got very, very fine wires in there, which if they break, you're in for a massive trouble. You see those little guys over here? Those are all the coils in the oscillator and in the tuning. Now, I'm not sure. I think this is the oscillator and this is the front end. There's one for each. And there's the adjustable caps here so that you can do an RF alignment, so that you can align the signal coming in with whatever's showing on the dial. I have the instructions, I believe, on the service manual. This thing looks so familiar. It looks so much like the one that I took apart. And I took the one apart just as an exercise to see if I could. And the thing that surprised me most is that it actually worked when I put it together again. That I can see inside this box, the only cap that I need to change is that one. And it's easily accessible. That's a 22 nanofarad, 0.022. So that shouldn't be a problem at all. That's actually very, very accessible. This whole thing is incredibly accessible. If you look at the underside of the IF transformers, even they are pretty clear. All the wiring is routed along these sort of clips on the edge of the chassis, and you can actually follow them quite easily, and I don't see any problems. Obviously, sometimes one speaks too soon, but I don't see anything too dramatic here. Over here, same story, enough space to remove the caps. There's some crazy one down there. That guy's going to have to probably get replaced, and it's on the underside, so I might just leave the base, take the top off, and put new caps in there, or restuff it, depending on how I feel. That switch that I told you about, this is the power switch. It's just a normal on-off toggle, but the toggle part, the rocker, is cut to fit into this little thingy here, so it actually does that. And it just basically is doing what you would do to a toggle switch, on, off. And because this is released now, that toggle works. And if we have to replace that, we can. I've actually put in a normal toggle switch before, where I just shaped the rocker to fit into there, because I couldn't get one of these but it's not a problem. Okay, one more thing to look at, and then I'm going to tell you what the game plan is. Here on the side, we have the selenium rectifier. Now, this is the same as the one I did. Very dangerous. Usually the side of the chassis has got no live voltages, and this just proves you should consider that everything has got live voltages on it. This thing is live. You got 220 volts or 200 and something volts AC on here, across here. And you've got your B plus coming out of here, going to the filter cap, goes to the tubes, and then it takes it through a resistor, which gives you your second B plus that goes to the filter cap as well. So there is a lot of high voltage over here. You've also got the Magic Eye tube over here, which has got B plus on it. You've got the AC voltage just above the transformer here. So yeah, this little chassis can bite you if you treat it like you would a normal chassis from some of the other radios where everything is inside and not on the outside like they have here. Once you get used to it, it's not a problem. Working with it, not getting shocked. It's always a problem when you get shocked. Okay, step number 1. I'm going to check the power transformer. I'm going to check the output transformer. As I've repeated before, I've got 2 videos, each focused on doing a test on the output transformer and the power transformer, which I do whenever I do any restoration. It just tells me that the 2 transformers are fine. Those videos are short and sweet, and they're in something called, it's a playlist that I've created called Restoration Building Blocks. If they pass those tests, we know we've got a good output transformer and a good power transformer. All right, so the game plan now is test the power transformer, test the output transformer. Those 2 elements are crucial, and usually, not always, if one of those is dead, it's probably not worth carrying on with the restoration. There are exceptions, as I've shown in the previous restoration I did, the Vega, where the output transformer was dead, and it still went through fine. You can get replacements from part sets and so on. So output transformer and power transformer, check those. Then I've got to check the power supply section, make sure that the voltage is all getting to where they should. Perhaps even do a power up without the tubes, just to make sure we've got no shorts and that the B plus is getting where it should be going. And then I work on the output stage, the power amp stage. Make sure we've got audio from the point where it comes in as a phono signal. That's really the entire audio stage can be tested that way. You choose pickup, the TA point here. You feed audio into the pickup phono signal, phono input, and you can test the entire audio stage. And then we go back into the radio itself, the radio section, AM and FM, and then we probably do an alignment and everything else. Since there's very little to do at the moment with this corona scare, and the president has just declared, our president has just declared a state of emergency, so movement is completely restricted. We've got to make sure everybody stays safe. So I'll have a lot of time, I think, and probably do a bit more than I usually do on these restorations lately. One does get a bit bored. Yep, bored. So maybe I'll go into a little bit more detail on this one since I've got the time. And I hope you've enjoyed that. I look forward to having you around to see the entire series, see if we can get this thing back up and running and looking beautiful. And if you've liked this, please subscribe. If you subscribe, click that bell thingy. You know what? Somebody should do a video on what YouTubers should say when they finish their videos, like bell, subscribe, share, like, and all that jazz, because this is so repetitive. Anyway, you know the drill. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.